Camden Select Board meeting for December 17, 2024. Thank you for those in attendance, whether in person or either of our online opportunities, which is via Zoom or YouTube. We're not currently broadcasting on channel 1303 via Spectrum tonight. Before we begin our agenda, I'll ask my colleagues if there are any items on the agenda that should be adjusted in order or sequence. No?
Do you want me, no, I guess we'll wait until we get to the consent agenda items.
Would you like to move anything from the consent agenda to something else?
Yeah, I was planning on requesting that we move the approval of commercial fishermen applications from the consent agenda to an action item.
Very good. So we'll move the consent agenda item approval of fishermen's applications to item B of action items.
I forget if we have to vote on that or not, but.
Tom, you good with that?
I'm fine. Yep.
Also, our next item is public comment on non-agenda items. In a matter of on the public comment on non-agenda items, we welcome all comments relative and relevant to our town or issues that are important to you. Although we are officially unable by process to respond to the comments directly tonight, it is important to share your comments and concerns in this forum publicly on record. Know your comments are appreciated. Just by a show of hands, just so we can plan our time, how many folks do we have here planning to speak? Great. Thank you. And with that, public comments on non-agenda items, just remember to turn the mic on and introduce yourself.
Turn the mic on.
Button.
Press the button.
Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Doc Wallace. I live at 69 Elm Street. Just let me say before I speak that I've sat on that side of the desk for over 20 years in large municipalities, and I appreciate the fact that you're giving me the time to speak, and that I think it's important to listen to the public. I just will say that I've been told that the Camden board has a reputation for being tolerant of public speakers, but not very often responding to them positively. So I want to say that in advance. My issue is paid parking. I believe that it's a pretty big item for a small town, and an item like that should go to public vote. I was very disappointed to see that it was handled administratively at the board level. I've spoken to many people in town. Actually, many people have spoken to me and have said that they really weren't clear on the fact that paid parking has been approved, and they were much less informed about the process of it, and it's exactly how the implementation of it goes. I know that the business people in town that I've spoken to, I haven't spoken to anybody in the business community that says it's a good thing. I took advantage yesterday of the power outage to walk up and down Main Street and ducked into a couple of dark stores, and was pretty well met with disdain on the concept of public parking from all of them. So I'm not here to debate it, and I've also been told by your own town staff that my appearance here tonight is pretty much hopeless, that basically I'll make my comment and you will hopefully listen to it. You won't act on it. And then the only process for us to go forward after that is to go to a petition, which I will be happy to participate in. I'm not going to lead it, but I'd be up there front and center with the petition. I understand we need about 300 signatures or so in order to force the issue onto a public vote. So that's basically my comment. I would be asking you to put the item on the next ballot. You probably will not do that, but at least I've done my bit by being here to ask for that. I do have one question on the board. You can probably answer it. I believe that if we do go to petition, that anyone who is a taxpayer but who is not a resident is disenfranchised. from the possibility of participating in the petition. Am I correct on that?
It's not a petitionable item.
But people who vote, and the question is if people vote in town, is it?
It's not a petitionable
Right, is
item.
it-
So I feel like,
Is it resident? or
like
is
if
it
we're going to
vote?
answer a question, we should correct the statement that a petition is the way to go, because it's not. The select board has a statutory responsibility to make a decision on traffic and parking, and it can't be.
So it's a done deal. We're finished.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Probably a
Thank you.
larger conversation.
There's a much
difficult to-
larger
This is
conversation
the
about
reason
all
we
this.
don't get into this back and forth, because it could, I would love to talk about it tonight. I think a lot of us would, but it would just take so long because there are so many layers in terms of what can be voted on, what can't be voted on, which aspects are still up for debate, which aren't.
And I'd really ask, I know it's very emotional, there's a real knee-jerk reaction to it, but I think that it can be done in a way that it minimally impacts residents and it really benefits the community. And I feel like if people have an open mind and they want to read the data and look at the data that we've collected and the years and years of study, that, people might feel
Excuse
a little
me.
bit differently.
This is not on the agenda, so we really shouldn't go into it. And that's why, to give other people awareness is why we don't.
I agree. I
unfortunately, go
just
into
feel
the
like
discussion. I
A
understand.
process item about like a petition might lead people to an action that would be just a real, just not appropriate. So I just feel like that's important to correct.
At this point, it's probably best that we don't comment on people's responses, but whenever people do bring up a topic, this topic, another topic, regardless of how we feel about it one way or another, know that those things are considered in future agenda items in general. And like that would be one of those pieces. Anyway.
Can I ask, is there any possibility of going beyond the board to the state level to have something undone that this board has done?
Usually what we
But-
do during this time is we direct people to reach out to the town manager outside of the meeting. And so there are a lot of just administrative questions that can be
Doc, I'd be
answered that way.
happy to speak with you more about this outside a meeting.
I would be very happy to talk to you.
Thank you. I'm sorry that we can't go into that any further because of having to give other people opportunity as well to weigh in who might not have been in attendance tonight. That's the main reason why we have to put our agendas and our packets out early to give everyone an opportunity. However, we still want to have people speak and bring up an item that's a concern so that it can be on an agenda later on, whatever the item is. Any other comments on non-agenda items tonight? Nope. Great. On to the next item, which is the consent agenda item that we have, which is the renewal victualler for the Jack Bar at 43 Mechanic Street. Here we go. You're right. Approval of select board minutes, December 3rd, 2024.
I move to approve the select board minutes as presented.
I'll second that.
Any discussion or comment, Tom?
No, thank you.
So moved.
We moved and seconded.
And
All in favor?
all in favor? 4-0. Thank you. As we were saying earlier, item 3, the consent agenda. Renewal of the victual license for the Jack Bar at 43 Mechanic Street. Any issues with that? Tom,
Nope, nope.
can we get a motion to approve the consent agenda as designed?
The consent agenda normally passes without objection.
Awesome. So no vote necessary.
So move
Great.
on to public hearings. yeah.
Public hearing for the Community Development Block Grant of Mountainside Park.
Woo! Yay!
Hello. So this has been long in the making, and there's a long process that has to happen to get community development block grant funds from the state. We had a hearing last March. I prepared a memo. Hopefully everyone read it. We did a memo in March, or a public hearing, and that was to apply for the funds. And we were actually invited to apply for those funds. They didn't have an open application, but the state reached out to us to ask us to apply. We held that hearing, moving through the process, and I'll give you just a summary on the project. This is a sewer extension project to take public sewer up Molyneux Road up to the Mountainside Community Co-op Mobile Home Park on 52. It's about a $2.5 million project. I worked with the Community Development Institute to obtain $1.3 million of funds from congressionally directed spending from Senator Collins and King, and Shelley Pingree supported that. So they were I really very much appreciate them and their work to get that money. We were still well short of the funds. So again, we got $1 million coming from the Community Development Block Grant Program. So we're right now, what we're doing is this is the project development phase, which includes environmental reviews, project design, those kinds of things. And those are all underway. We're having this hearing. That's what tonight is. It's been noticed in the newspaper as required. The environmental reviews, like I said, is ongoing. Tomorrow or Thursday, I'm going to make a finding of no significant environmental impact on this project. It's just a requirement for the feds. There's a lot of paperwork, and we have to dot all our I's and cross all our T's, and that's what we're doing here. Mountainside Community Co-op is here, I think, to support the project. If you don't know what's happening with the sewage at Mountainside right now, it's being trucked from a tank, from all the mobile homes drained to a tank that is failing. It is being pumped into that tank by Steve Beveridge, who lives up the road, and then he hauls that over to the wastewater treatment facility. So the intent is for this project to go out to bid. Dirigo Engineering is preparing the bid and construction documents currently. It'll hopefully go out to bid early to mid-February. And the plan is for the project to start this late spring, early summer, and then we'll connect Mountainside to sewer, which will be fantastic. So that is the scope of the hearing. That's all it is. You'll probably notice in next week or the week after that a big notice in the newspaper again about this finding of no environmental impact and a request for them to release the funds. They can't release any funds until that is all done, and we've dotted all our I's and crossed all our T's. I guess right now, any questions from the board, happy to answer them. And I do think probably Margaret Jones, who's the head of the board of the community co-op, is here, and she may want to say something. I will say it's a pretty fantastic thing what the community did over there. Is the mobile home park was for sale. The community got together, formed a cooperative nonprofit to purchase the park. It was pretty innovative, and now it's kind of been modeled a couple other times in the state right now. A very large one down in Brunswick is underway. So that's all I have. If you have any questions, I'm here to answer them.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm just curious. Thank you. I'm just curious. How often do they have to pump out their tank now? Is it daily?
It all depends on flow and depends on any infiltration, but I think Margaret may speak to it. But I think it's at least 4 times a day, sometimes upwards of 6 times a day. There's a truck being hauled with sewage being hauled over the wastewater treatment plant.
Well, that brings up the follow-up question. The INI, are we working on their system, working with them to make sure they're...
Yeah, so good question. And they are doing, they've got a contract out there right now, as I understand, that they're working on to do the INI to make sure that's okay. We do think that a majority of that INI is coming from the tank itself that is cracked. So we're hoping that that's where they are. But they're working with Justin and Dave at Wastewater to make sure everything's going to be okay when we connect. I would also need to mention that in order to make this project work, we have to put a pump station on their property in order to make this work. So we're going to have to, in June, have a vote for a town vote to accept an easement for us to put a pump station there and allow us to maintain it. And that's going to go to voters in June, and we'll get that prepped for you as well. Any other questions?
With the pump station and any town-owned infrastructure that ends up there, I haven't looked carefully at this at all to know if there's, some kind of potential additional public benefit that could be derived, and maybe there isn't. But I know in the past, when the town has built new pump stations, I feel like there have been a lot of missed opportunities where there was significant benefit provided. It's usually been for really high-end, actually, areas of town like Norumbega Drive and places like that, where there could, with the easements that were needed in order to put the pump station there, really should have also been pedestrian easements that could have provided access. So I would just, I guess, ask that we
Look at it.
look at that to see if, I'm not saying it would be the greatest access point necessarily for the state park at this point, but are there larger things that we could be looking at there just to?
I think we're looking at all those kinds of opportunities. Keep in mind that this pump station is going to be, it's hard to explain right now, but when you come in the one driveway, it'll be up past that first lot. That's not part of the park, and it'll be back there. So it's not like way up into the park. And the only thing that we're asking for is going to be an easement for that location of that pump station, because all of the other laterals, the sewer lines, all remain the parks and are not the towns. So we're not going up into the park per se with an easement. And then most of all the other work is going to be done within the current right of way on Molyneux and 52. There will be another pump station halfway up Molyneux Road going towards where it's going to connect. And then from there, it's going to be all gravity fed. I will say that since this is community development block grant funding, the only ones that can tie into the line are those of LMI in the park. That's low to moderate income from the park. We are hoping for and planning to lay another pipe with stubs along Molyneux Road while we're doing this work, and we'll be keeping separate books on that, so that eventually the plan has always been, if you look in our comp plan, that Molyneux Road is in our growth area and it's a village extension zone, is the zone. So we'll have an opportunity for other properties along Molyneux Road, hopefully to connect to sewer in the future, but it won't be in this line, although there'll be another line running near and adjacent to it. It's just the reality of working with federal dollars, community development block grant funds. Does not make a whole lot of sense, but it is what it is.
Tom has a question too.
Thank you. Yeah, Jeremy, that was related to my question, and just to be a little more specific about that. So 2 pump stations, and the one that's on Molyneux Road, you'd have to make future provisions there for a second forced main for people to be able to tie into it. So gravity back to that pump station, and then force main from there. I know the physical layout fairly well, so I'm curious about that, because I understood there were some restrictions. But a real benefit of this whole project would be for anybody who lives along that route to be able to eventually tie in.
Absolutely. I mean, that's our hope, and we're going to try to make that happen, Tom. We just can't use the federal funds to do that. So while we're doing that work, we're going to try to lay that other line. And I bring that up. I'm not the one designing it. Dirigo is doing it. They're in the process right now of finalizing the construction drawings. So I think we'll have more answers to some of these questions in the next week or two, is my hope.
Yeah, these projects can get fairly complex with bid alternates, but this would be an appropriate opportunity to break it down to a few bid alternates to find out what that additional cost would be.
Yep. Understood. That's the plan.
So just to clarify,
Yeah.
basically what you're looking to do is make one ditch and put in 2 pipes.
Basically, I'm not the designer and I'm not a wastewater
but
sewer
basically-
engineer. But that's sure.
Dig the ditch once
Correct.
on the federal dollar.
While we're there with contractors doing it, I mean, it's going to be a little,
That's just
we have to
crazy.
keep we have to keep separate books on this, to be honest with you too. So when they're doing something that is related to that other line, they're going to be keeping a separate book on that, as are we, because of the federal funds involved.
Right.
It's just the way it is.
And you say separate books, but that's really just to show the allotment of the
Federal money.
dollars. for
Correct.
the
Where
federal
that's going is, yep,
versus
exactly.
the other.
Yep, exactly.
What other impacts might there be for the people on Molyneux Road while this is happening?
I mean, there'll be some traffic interruptions during the project. Deergo was out doing ledge borings and assessing the ledge in certain locations. There's no anticipation that there will be any blasting needed at all. They believe that they can pound all of that or hammer all of that out in those locations. So they'll be implementing erosion control as required, all that kind of stuff. So other than temporary disruptions for traffic, and won't be shut down. It'll be, one lane.
So once the pipe is in, we are going to stub off services to everyone. And that's where we're going to have a conversation about like an Inspector Connect program. So everybody along Molyneux Road right now is on private septic systems. This will be a real good opportunity for those who have septic systems at the end of their lives to connect into the public sewer. And, those who have newer septic systems, we wouldn't require that until they're ready to be replaced. So this is something that we're going to need to get the word out about, because we want to, make sure that we have a good understanding of, whose system is in what condition, and give them their options for that.
I would also add really quick that, this is just in terms of housing. There's obviously a housing crunch everywhere. But the village extension zone, and what we did with the zoning amendments that for housing, increased housing density and opportunities over the last couple of years, the lot size requirements go down considerably if you're on public sewer. So maybe we'll even see more housing opportunity and options on Molyneux Road.
I resisting the urge to dig deeper with this double pipe situation, because it feels like normally there's a cost sharing opportunity so that we could pay a portion, but I know that we can't do that here tonight.
Otherwise, we're going to be putting one pipe in, and it's going to serve the mobile home park only.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. I don't feel satisfied that everything has been looked at, because for us to be maintaining two pipes forever is crazy, and not really what was.
Nobody can connect directly into a force main.
Right.
They need to, and it's the force main that's going from.
Okay.
Right.
There's a force main rather than
from the park, and I think it's halfway up Molyneux Road is where the other.
So it's just
It's just chasing a gravity line, so
it's just chasing
neighborhoods
the gravity line.
can connect directly into it.
So that's different. Okay,
It is a little different.
There's an actual practical reason.
There's
It's
a
not because
technical
we can't.
reason.
Right.
We wouldn't do it any differently if it were.
Nope, it would be the same. Allison, envision.
Yeah, no, I
know-
get it. It's just because he said that it was because of that reason, of the reason of the federal dollars. But it sounds like, okay. Moving on to the other thing, the whole idea of really doubling down on Molyneux Road density development seems concerning to me, given the pedestrian accessibility situation there is just not very good at all.
I hear you.
And so I don't know if that really is a great goal.
I'm not doubling down on it. I just wanted to mention that in our comp plan, it talks about sewer and the growth area of our town is the village extension zone. That's what our comp plan identifies as the growth area.
Because what I've heard is during this sewer project, the opportunities for improving pedestrian safety and adding a shoulder on Molyneux Road and all of that, it's kind of like just so difficult that we probably aren't going to be able to do that, which to me says there's little chance of ever doing anything to make Molyneux Road better in that way. It feels like this whole thing that happened with Mountainside was just so great that I do think there's a lot of energy to try to make Route 52 safer for pedestrians and cyclists. We hear it all the time. I'd rather see our energy kind of going into developing that corridor. But I'm also wondering if there's anything that the town can do to try to proactively identify any other situations like this in town, like smaller parks that might eventually be sold, that we're not going to have a Margaret in every one of these communities. And so if we can do something to try to, prevent losing, like I think about like the Powder Mill Park and places like that, it would be a real loss to lose that.
I agree.
So anyway, thank you, everybody. And
Are there any public comments or anything?
I'm Margaret Jones, and I am board president at Mountainside Community Cooperative, and I'm also a resident there. And I would go on and on about this project, but I think that Jeremy's done a very good job of letting you know. I just really want to say that Mountainside is so grateful for the cooperation and the interest in this project from the town. It's been an issue that's been a disaster for probably 40 years. And it's reached the end of its life. And this project is really going to save the park. And we appreciate it ever so much. And it's getting more and more critical every day. So thank you.
Thank you.
that does go to the Rossin Avenue pump station. So I think echoing Ken's comments too about making sure that we check that I&I situation. Because that's that same pump station where.
We currently are contracting, we had a bid of $30,000, which is just beyond the pale. And we're also doing a water distribution system, and part of that is knowing exactly where and what our septic system is. So as part of that, we are looking at a different company to do that. And our infiltration, I mean, if you were to walk in that building, and I know none of you want to do that.
I'd be happy to.
Allison. No, I'm at number 13, knock on the door, I'll give you a tour. And if Steve's around, I'm sure he'd even give you a ride in the truck.
Oh, that would be fun.
And you won't like it. But if you go in there, like the other day when it was raining, I can see the water just pouring down into the tank.
Oh, wow.
From the ground. And there's also a 3-foot crack in that tank. So when the water table goes up, it goes into the tank.
Mm-hmm.
The system is in pretty good shape, but we are having it cameraed and checked out.
Great.
Thank you. Jeremy, maybe you said this earlier and I missed it, but what's the realistic expectation for when this would be completed? I know there's a lot between now and then, but I'm just curious.
I mean, other than my understanding is it's going to be done by next fall. That's
Really?
The hope.
So
Wow,
this is
that soon.
This is in preparation to
Great.
go out to bid this winter.
Right. It's going out to bid February for building this season, construction season coming up.
That's great.
Gonna be a busy summer.
Yeah.
Busy summer.
That's all I have.
Great. Anybody else? Any other public comment? No. Seeing none. Thank you.
Oh, good. Thank you.
Item number 5, select board reports. Cam, would you like to start us off?
Sure. The Historic Resources Committee met yesterday, and as you know, they have a big chore ahead. They're going to write the Historic Preservation Ordinance, which they have started working with Jeremy, and they do have a first rough draft, which is not ready for sharing, but they're working on it, using as a model other communities such as Bangor. They initially had hoped, it was ambitious, they had hoped to have it ready to go by the June ballot. That's not going to happen. So no surprise, but they got much more work to do on it. So they're aiming for the November ballot. They will have public presentations in April or May and then present it to us in fairly final form in August so that we can do what we need to do to get it on the November ballot. But that's their big project for this year. And that is about it from to report to you. Chris will be working on budget because there may be expenses and consultants in drawing up this, but Audrey, he said he'd be in touch with you to generate a budget of some kind. Thanks.
Great. Tom, do you have anything to report on?
Only that the planning board is meeting on Thursday at 5. I see that as a discussion item, so I assume we'll get into that a little bit more later.
Okay.
Yes, the Conservation Commission developed signage that says entering McGonagall River watershed a while back, and those were designed actually by Will Addis, who's no longer on the Conservation Commission, but he worked with the other members also. So some of those signs have gone up. You can see them around town. I think there are 6 of them up. And then we're going to work with the McGonagall Watershed Association to place some of the others in the towns outside of Camden. Of course, all of the water comes to us, but they thought it would be good to actually put the signage, not just like on the town line, but the idea is to create a greater awareness of the fact that the water that we have coming through here is coming from all these other towns as well. So the rest of the signs probably won't go up until, well, I guess the ground is kind of thawed right now, isn't it? So maybe there will be an opportunity, but we're going to be working with Watershed Association on that. There's a Camden Rockport Pathways, or excuse me, the Camden portion of the Camden Rockport Pathways Committee is meeting on Thursday of this week. Ken and I chatted maybe a tiny bit about Ken might do a little co-liaisoning with me, or even taking it over if you feel like you want to attend that meeting. Of course, all meetings are open to absolutely everybody. But
Thursday, did you say?
yes, yeah, I think that's going to be on Zoom. I can send you a
Thanks.
link.
Yeah, thank you.
I think the more people involved, the better. Also, we had I don't know if you're going to cover this in your manager's report or not. We had a meeting with, another meeting with Rockport, of the sewer, whatever we're calling the wastewater subcommittee, working on developing that really short-term agreement that can help us get through the short term with Camden Rockport Sewer to figure out what Rockport's going to be charged in the short term, and what the capacity is, and then what the longer term steps would be in terms of working toward either an interlocal agreement with us or working with Rockland or different regional efforts. So we had another meeting. It's going really well, actually. Hopefully others will think so too when it comes to the select board, but we had a draft agreement we're looking at. Hopefully, I think the hope is to be able to bring something to the boards in January. Rockport only meets once a month as a select board, so that was interesting. And also, they showed us how they do their minutes and a few other things. So they've developed some good ideas for streamlining things. Then the other thing that I just wanted to say briefly is that last Wednesday, or 2 weeks ago, Wednesday after our last select board meeting, right after discussing the Pathways Committee master plan and pedestrian safety and all of that, we had a really tragic death on John Street, a woman named Michelle Bishop, who lived at Mary Garden Estates. And this is just a really sad one, because as many of you know, we've discussed the sidewalk that's going to be installed on John Street, another project that has a sewer component as well, which has been a really long-standing goal for the town. And many people have seen Michelle on her wheelchair, sometimes the powered wheelchair, sometimes the just rolling wheelchair on John Street, trying to get to Hannaford or Maritime Farms. And we were all just so excited for her because it was going to really make a big difference for her. And so really sad that she was hit and killed on Wednesday. And, a reminder, I think, to everybody, this is something that we talk about on the Pathways Committee, and it's been all over the news, but pedestrian deaths due to car crashes or pedestrian car conflicts have risen dramatically across the country. And, there are all kinds of reasons for that. But one of the reasons is because the size of vehicles has increased. And, so the hits that do happen are just much more deadly. And what we do know is the faster somebody is going, the more likely that hit will be to result in a death. And, just the slower you go, the better. And also this time of year with daylight savings time ending, the incidents go up as well. At nighttime, everything gets dark earlier, so it's harder to see. And then there's this issue of the sun glare, which people don't always prepare for as well, but just to slow down to a crawl, when you can't see, and try to remember all the other users on the road. So, thanks.
Great. Thank you. I just have one quick update, actually, well, two. One, I was unable to attend the Snowball celebration there on December 7th. I heard Ken was able to attend, so that was great, and
Yes,
good
and
recognition
as
for the
well.
town. Unfortunately, I had another commitment, but on the other side, on the McGunnacook River Citizens Advisory Committee, they are holding weekly discussions, and they're really developing the recommendations on what they're going to present to the select board. And as a result, I'm not attending those meetings to enable to have their discussions without any perceived or actual influence by a select board member at the meeting. And they're at the point they're running, and they're having thoughtful discussions with each other, kind of like reminds me of a bit of jury duty, which I have in January. But they're able to be there to discuss among themselves, and they are still public meetings. They've done their research, and they're formulating their final recommendation to the select board to be ready for a June vote on what their recommendation is.
It's interesting that you're not going because of that. Are you going, Ken, still?
Through the MRCAC meetings.
Yeah.
Of the last two, I made one of them.
Okay. Good.
Nope.
I haven't
I'd
gone
rather let them have their piece without feeling. I monitor. I see the information. I know that it's being handled. They're able to reach out if they happen to need anything or any of the town resources. They can reach out. But other than that, I really would rather have their decisions being made among the committee. So that's the position I'm taking on that.
Okay, that's good to know. Did you tell them that's why you're not going, so they don't?
I did. I sent a message to, after some thought, I did send a message to Deb to say, hey, you probably noticed I'm not there. And this is why. But I'm here.
Yeah, no, that
but
makes
I'm
sense.
here
That
in
makes
case-
sense. No, it's good because I haven't got, I wanted to go, but I.
Yep. I think it's best to, their intent is to, and what they've been charged to do is make the recommendation to the select board. So they may feel more free to speak among themselves. Granted, they do always have public involvement in that they're able to listen and whatnot, but I didn't want to try to influence it in either way. Anyway, that's up for me.
Sounds good.
Audra.
All right. So I first wanted to acknowledge the just really difficult decision made by the Penn Bay Chamber of Commerce Board of Directors to close the organization. I know that, the board and the staff, they did everything that they could to maintain services for their members during a period of time where they were really struggling with declining membership and then revenues. So in light of the closure, I've reached out to their board leadership, and we're going to be working with them and a leader from the business community here in Camden that they've appointed to help hand the visitor center building at the public landing back to the town. So a lot of people probably aren't aware of the fact that the town owns that building, and the chamber had I believe it was a 20-year revocable license agreement over it. When the town approved the public landing master plan in 2013, one of the aspects of that was approved was converting that building eventually into public restrooms and showers and that kind of thing, as well as moving the harbor master's main office there. So this might be a good time to revisit the master plan and look at, what the goals of the master plan are and the use of that building into the future. And that sort of brings me into my next point, which is in the new year, sort of early in the new year, January or February, I'd like to schedule a capital planning workshop. We're due to do a more comprehensive upgrade to our 5 to 10 year capital plan. The way that it's sort of the capital planning information is incorporated in the budget. It's really only the annual requests that have fallen out of it. So I think it's really important. We're at a good time to look at everything a little more comprehensively, given, where we're at with some of our bigger projects and some of the bigger, requests and ideas that have come forward to the board recently. I think seeing those in the context of the bigger, broader needs of the town are going to be really important for everyone for this financial year and moving forward. So, I think that 2025 is, a good year to kind of refresh that effort. And one of those items that we'll need to look at is that building. In regards to the town office, the absentee ballots are available now and will remain available until 3:30 p.m. on Thursday, January 9th for the January 14th election for the capital items that the school district is asking voters to vote on. So these are going to be very different than the ballots that get sent out at most elections. They're very homemade. They're going to be hand counted. And my apologies for incorrect information about that. We do have the ballots. They're just not going to be scanned through the scanners, and the ADA requirements, I guess, are different for those than what we need to do for our other elections. So if people are interested in a ballot, you can request that it be mailed to you, and our clerk's office will do that, or you can come into the town office during business hours and vote in person, absentee before the election day, just like you can during any other election cycle. So the 2025 dog licenses are available now. So if you have not registered your dog, please bring in your current rabies certificate with you for each dog that you're licensing. So neutered or spayed dogs cost $6 to license. If your dog is unneutered, unspayed, it's $11. And there's a $25 late fee per dog that's assessed by the state after February 1st. So if you haven't done that, and this is a note to myself, please remember to do that before February 1st.
And does the town gets notified by the vets, don't they, as far as who has dogs or owns dogs? Is that correct?
Not really.
How is the notification? No?
No, it's
Honor system?
kind of honor system.
Okay.
Although some towns are more aggressive than others, I've heard, in terms of doing that.
Yes.
And
Some will call and
try to,
Okay.
seek it out.
if you want to report your neighbor for not registering their dog, we can call this anonymous line.
That's okay.
Just kidding.
So the harbor waitlist bills have been sent out for 2025. And the town office is going to be closed on Tuesday, December 4th, Christmas Eve, as well as Christmas Day, which is Wednesday, the 25th. And the Opera House just wanted to share some little facts with all of you. So in the 2024 calendar year, there were over 14,500 people that came through the Opera House to attend events, and that includes summer sounds. So they had 82 days worth of events. Some of them were multi-day events, and this does not count rehearsals as well. So there are many events where, they rent out the Opera House and need to use it in advance for rehearsals, like with many of the dance troupes. So half of these events were rentals, 7 were free events, and the rest were all Opera House productions. So the highest grossing shows for 2024 Bob Marley. So there were 2 shows and it was the highest single day revenue. Lunessa, which is our Christmas production, and it's coming back for the 11th year as well. So Kia's 3 shows, The Nutcracker, Gabriel Byrne that was put on with Finding Our Voices, and A Day in the Life of Beatles show, Dance Mania and Nick Sifrin. So a lot of these are, local acts and rental events, which is, really exciting to see everybody supporting our local performing arts scene. With the police department, they're currently working to fill a vacancy and they have a potential candidate that they're going through the process with. They're going to be sponsoring this individual to go through the law enforcement pre-service phase 2 training at the academy, which starts in early January. So if the candidate completes the training successfully, they'll be certified as a reserve officer. And they're going to continue with their full-time hiring process. And the department is only a sponsor for this candidate at this point, but all the expenses will be paid by them because of it being a reserve position in the end. The department needs to replace a 14-year-old AED machine, and they're looking into this as well in partnership with the fire EMS. This is all going to be integrated as part of the 2026 budget, but when we do the comprehensive capital planning, it'll be included under capital equipment. The parking enforcement office has been relocated from the lobby to inside the police department. And this space is going to provide fire and EMS with a private office space outside of public view. They have to do reporting with HIPAA requirements for confidentiality. So it's really important that they have a private space. So in the assessing department, Caitlin is working on property transfers. And that involves a lot of reading and recording of deeds, updating vision records, editing tax maps. Carrie's been conducting inspections and meeting with taxpayers, and he continues to work on the legislative policy committee from the Maine Municipal Association on property tax reform initiatives. And at some point, I think it would be really good to have Carrie come in and talk about some of their proposals because we've gotten a lot of questions, of course, about the end of the property tax freeze program for seniors. And this group is looking at other ways of reducing the property tax burden that doesn't put the burden from the seniors that it was frozen to onto sort of your younger taxpayers. So both of our assessors are working together on improving equity and how Lake McGonagall's Islands are valued, because there's some work that needs to be done on that right now so that the ratios are improved. The fire department personnel again assisted the Knox County Toys for Tots program. They responded also to the fatal accident on John Street that Allison was talking about earlier. So, they were on the scene in less than 4 minutes and were, unfortunately unable to revive the victim of the accident, but it was nice that they were there and able to respond so quickly. The fire department personnel are renovating the office that we talked about that the police department gave up. So with the Snow Bowl, the double chair and the tubing hill opened to the public on December 14th. I got a lot of good feedback from community members who are really excited to be out on the hill. So the Snow Bowl was also open on December 15th and it had really good turnout. So it was a soft opening that allowed the staff to get used to the new RFID system and the point of sale system. And it included also the computerized tracking of all the rental gear. So this has just really streamlined the process for all of our guests out there and the staff as well, and eliminated a lot of paperwork that was pretty time consuming. So on December 8th, and that was what Ken talked about, on December 8th, we had the annual open house. So that was the day after the event that Ken talked about, where the Snow Bowl was honored with a Community Spirit Award. So on the open house, there were many community members that came out to learn about the race and the ski school programs. So that was a successful way to get everybody excited about opening. So for Public Works and Wastewater, they were very proud that they participated so fully in Christmas by the Sea. They had 10 pieces of equipment. And, it's getting really excited with all the other towns participating as well with their equipment too. So also they had 2 additional snow events since the last select board meeting that they needed to be called in for and treat the roads. So they've continued the ditching and culvert work on Matthew John Street. They've installed speed boards on C Street to help with traffic calming. So this was part of the neighborhood traffic calming program where they requested some sort of traffic calming device. I don't think that that's going to be the final solution for C Street, but it's, a good way to gauge whether or not that that works for them or if they see any improvement. They had a local contractor repair several streetlights that were out. The Hannaford traffic signal was also repaired, and it has to be repaired again. So another activity that took up a lot of time were picking up down limbs from the windstorm that we had, or the rain and the windstorm that we had this past week. And they continue with ditching and stormwater improvements on Molyneux, Melvin Heights, Ragged Mountain, Howe Hill, Hofsis's Drive, and Matthew John. Or they're saying that they did a lot of work over the summer and into the fall. And with this recent rainfall that we had, normally with a rain event like that, we would see washouts occurring on many of those roads and, real problems on them. So a lot of that work that they did in those areas made a huge difference. And we're not impacted by that particular storm. The East Dam, for the first time since July, I believe, was open to lower the lake level. So on December 2nd, the lake level was at 32 inches below the spillway. And this was, in a part of the drought that we were having all summer. And the lake rose to 6 inches below the spillway. So that's a 26-inch rise just from that rainstorm alone. So that's pretty significant. So the East Dam's been adjusted to lower the lake down levels, so it's in compliance with our seasonal lake level policy, and that's 20 to 25 inches below the spillway. And the lake is currently at 10 inches below the spillway. And just so I don't forget while I'm rolling on, the fishermen's licenses, I'd recommend you table that item.
All right, thank you.
Oh.
Thank you, Audra. Up next, since we were just talking about the Snow Bowl, use of drift for snowmaking at the Camden Snow Bowl. And just so you know, too, this is Alan as an action item, which means the select board will vote on it tonight.
Great.
Want to.
Well, good evening, Jeff Nathan, General Manager, Camden Snow Bowl. Thank you for the opportunity to come talk to you about my recommendation to use drift. I think it's important to start with a little background on what it is and why we want to use it and how it will work. So drift is a widely used snowmaking additive that enhances snowmaking efficiency and quality. It works by lowering the surface tension of water. So what it does is it flattens out the water so that when it comes out of the snow guns, it creates longer hang time and there's less clumping. So the punchline with it, and I'm going to talk about why this is important for people that are not skiers and snowboarders, it makes a lighter snow. And that's the punchline of what drift does for us. Drift is a organosilicone surfactant. If you're not familiar with surfactants, they're used in thousands of common products, including agricultural products, household cleaning products, personal care products, and medicine. I want to share a little bit about how we would use drift and how the process would work. So we would take a gallon of drift and mix it with 29 gallons of water and create a solution that then gets injected at 3 parts per million into our snowmaking system. So we have an injection unit already in place that's been there, for many, many years in the pump house. So, and so this 30 gallons of water would be essentially, that's what 29 gallons of water, 1 gallon of drift is what we would use over the course of a week long. If we were to make snow for a week, it would that's how long it would take for us to really go through that 30 gallon solution of 1 gallon of drift at 3 parts per million. If we were to use drift in 100% of our snowmaking over the course of a season, we'd use less than 12 gallons of drift over the course of a complete season. Drift was used at the Snow Bowl in the past. It's something that's used commonly throughout the industry. And I know in talking with some people within the community, they're more concerned about why we'd use it than why the industry or others in the industry use it. But I do think it's important to note that it's used throughout the world in the snowmaking industry. It's used. I can tell you there's a large resort in Western Maine that does not make snow without it. 100% of their snowmaking is with drift. And this is, if you think about the 3 major ski resorts in Western Maine, it's one of the 3 you would likely be thinking of. So let me talk a little bit about the benefits. I mentioned lighter snow, and lighter snow is a better quality snow. And so what's least important to me about this process is the but it is an important factor to consider, is it's a better guest experience. Lighter snow makes for a better guest experience. When I stack rank all of the reasons why I'd want to use it, that's at the bottom, right? But it is one of the reasons. It builds from there. So there's an operating efficiency component to it, which is really important. Less time on the groomers, this new piston bully we purchased last year or this year. Less time, less wear and tear. A lighter snow means less fuel expended in grooming out the snow. And because of how it comes out of the snow gun, it naturally is spread out farther than the clumped snow and the wet snow that's created when drift is not in play. So, when I think about less wear and tear on machinery, less diesel fuel used in the process of grooming snow, and potentially expanding the lifespan of this brand new 300,000 plus piece of equipment that the town so generously purchased for the Snow Bowl, I think that's a real plus. We live in coastal Maine. Coastal Maine means marginal temperatures and humidity. Drift allows us to make snow at higher temperatures and at higher humidity levels. This is important when we think about what we're attempting to do in terms of providing a product to our community, product being a ski resort, to our community and guests that come to ski at the Camden Snow Bowl. So using drift allows us to be more predictable in our snowmaking process, right? Because we know that if we can use it at higher temperatures, at higher humidity rates, then we open up the window that allows us to have more confidence in terms of when we can make snow and the volume we can make snow at, which allows us to be more predictable. And then the last piece is really what I consider to be the most important reason from my personal perspective. I've been a ski patroller for 8 years at the Camden Snow Bowl. I've dealt personally with a number of incidents that have occurred, where somebody was injured on the slopes. A lighter snow is a safer snow. It's difficult to debate that. And I think if you were to ask anybody who's been involved in ski patrol or an emergency response at a ski resort, they're going to tell you the same thing. Lighter snow is safer snow. And so, to me, if we have an opportunity to make a safer snow that also happens to be a more efficient, therefore more cost-effective, and arguably, better for the environment, as we're not, we're consuming less diesel. We're putting less hydraulic fluid into the snow system as a result of this. To me, that's a real plus. I know, and I was privy to some concerns raised to the select board by at least one member of the community about the environmental concerns of the use of drift. And I've had several conversations, with members of the community who are asking questions about that. I think it's important for everybody here to hear from me about that. And in my role, I want it to be, very well known that I'm not interested in doing anything that's going to hurt the environment. I'm just not. If there was evidence that drift would have a negative impact on Hosmer Pond or on the environment, I wouldn't bring it before you today with a recommendation to use it. It's just not who I am. Drift is used worldwide and throughout Maine and New England. I was unable in all of my research to find any information regarding harmful effects or the discontinuation of the use of drift. So knowing that it's used worldwide, knowing that it's used in the United States, in major ski resorts in Western Maine, so very close to home, there's still no information available that I was able to find or others were able to find that said any ski resort was asked to stop using it publicly, to stop using it, or any information that says that there's been a harmful impact as a result of the use of drift. I spent a lot of time with the safety data sheet for drift, and it was included in the information, one of the links that I included in the memorandum. I think it's important to look to note in there that drift is dispersible in water. I'm fortunate to have a chemist who is also happens to be our freestyle coach, but he's a chemist by trade, and I asked him to spend some time with the safety data sheet and to help explain to me, because I am not a chemist, what something means to be dispersible in water. And what he shared with me is that means there's no naturally occurring event where how we would be dispersing drift would ever accumulate at greater concentrations than what we would be dispersing it at. So in nature, it would never exceed 3 parts per million. And I think that's important. It will not achieve higher concentrations than 3 parts per million. And according to the manufacturer, drift has low toxicity. I knew I was not a chemist or an ecologist, and so it was important to me to get a different perspective. So I reached out to a gentleman named Brian Sladkey. Brian is a licensed professional geologist with 31 years of environmental consulting experience. His primary areas of his practice include environmental investigation and remediation for soil, groundwater, and surface water, human health and ecological exposure and risk assessments, environmental permitting and management of industrial construction and maintenance projects, and general industrial environmental compliance consulting work. He's a vice president at Sylar Services since 2006. I sent Brian all of the information, the technical bulletin, the SDS sheet, the information from CHS, which is the manufacturer and distributor, and aquatrolls, and asked him if he would take a look at that, including, and asked him if he would be willing to do his own research out there. And then I also sent him the memorandum that I intended or did provide to the select board. Brian's comments were that he had no concerns with the use of drift or the ecological impact that it would have. He noted it was widely used in the industry, and the fact that he was unable to find any public record of harmful impacts to humans on the environment indicates that it helps him indicate that it is low risk, and that he supports the recommendation of the use of drift. If you have a chance to go out to the CHS website, so CHS being the manufacturer and who distributes it, you would read on their website that beyond efficacy, we are dedicated to environmental responsibility. Drift's potential energy saving, reduced grooming requirements, increased yield per foot acre of water, and quicker snowmaking times contributes to a more sustainable snowmaking process. Environmentally speaking, not only do we want to make sure drift is safe in the water, but we also want to save energy and resources. How do we suspect drift does that? It converts more snow to ice pellets, thus reducing snowmaking energy through the pumps and snow gun electricity. It's easier to groom, thus saving fuel and wear and tear on the snowcat. And it increases the yield per acre foot of water to snow. So it makes more snow more efficiently and effectively with the water going through the system. And finally, it reduces snowmaking time, allowing for an earlier opening and earlier trail completion. So I'm happy to take questions, but it is my recommendation to the select board that we use drift in our snowmaking system at the Snow Bowl.
I know there are public comments on this, or at least I've gotten many public comments. So I don't know if maybe we want to start with, or I would rather wait for my own,
Yeah, are there any people in the public or online?
or I can ask, I mean, I'm
that
happy
would
to ask
like
questions.
to ask questions about the drift snowmaking product? Go. Unfortunately, sorry for the inconvenience, but we do have to have you speak up here so people can hear you outside of the room. That's the purpose.
How close should I be to this?
You're good.
Closer the better, actually, but depend.
I have a question for you.
Yes, sir.
If one of the 3 large ski areas in Western Maine use drift, why don't all 3 of them use drift?
I've been told all 3 use drift. I have not been able to confirm that.
And what about the frequency of use in, you've said that it's used throughout the country and throughout the world. Is it 1%, 10%, 50%? Do you have a way of describing the extent of use and the frequency and the popularity of use?
I don't have facts. I have anecdotal data from talking with people and getting information from the manufacturer itself that it is commonly used because of the benefits that it provides in snowmaking throughout the world. So I don't have specific data on the volume that's used. There were some estimates on a risk assessment that I also included a link to in the memorandum that talked about really incredible volumes of it that were used specifically in Vermont in the ski resorts there. But I don't have data to specifically say this is the volume of use.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Anybody else here or online with a
I
question?
mean, I've got tons of questions.
That's cool. Look at.
Hi, I'm Dennis McGurk. I live in Camden. I'm a skier. I started looking in drift when Landon asked me to look into it many years ago, and so I accumulated a lot of articles on it. Back then, it was a competition between biological additives and drift, which actually is a surfactant, just spreads out the water rather than producing a seed for making snow. Since then, most of the biological products have declined in use in favor of using drift because of lower impacts. In the environment, in a water-based environment, it degrades in a couple weeks. And they found no toxic effects other than if somebody were to drink it. And that's not recommended. The biggest problem that they had that I couldn't find anything about, I wrote to the manufacturer to say, well, with climate change, a lot of ponds are having problems with algae growth. Does this exacerbate or does it help? It actually helps because it, as a surfactant, it inhibits algae growth, and it does not accumulate. It breaks down in within a couple weeks. So there was a study in New Mexico where they used it quite heavily, and at the end of the season, they checked the water level and they could not find any traces of the drift chemical in the water flow. So that's all I have.
Would you mind sending
Thank you.
that? Would you, that was really helpful context. Would you mind sending that to us? That, thanks.
Another gentleman in the back.
Hello, thanks for having us. Brian Robinson, Town of Camden resident, 30-year ski patroller, senior level, and I've worked at 3 ski areas over the course of the last 30 years. Each of those areas has relied, well, they've been in downstate New York and Western Mass and here in Camden. Each of them has relied on some additive for snowmaking as an essential part of an operation at a small ski area, not a big, huge resort. It's not Killington or something like that. And I'm an environmentalist at heart. My degree was mathematics and environmental analysis back in the late 70s and early 80s. So I'm extremely concerned about the environmental impact of anything that we might be doing. I'm reassured by the fact that we've used it before here, so we'd be using it again because it had been used during the Jeff Cooler era. For those of you who remember Jeff, God rest his soul. The research that I was able to do found that the only level of toxicity that they found at all was at a 25% concentration of the material. So at 25%, they noticed some toxicity. We would be applying it at 3 parts per million. 25%, for those of you that aren't as, that may be mathematically challenged, that would be 250,000 parts per million, or roughly 100,000 times as concentrated as what we're applying, or what we're proposing to apply, or what Jeff's proposing to apply. From a safety perspective, as a ski patroller, having handled hundreds of accidents over the course of 30 years, soft snow is much safer snow. Quite frankly, it's much preferable to ski and take toboggans down as well when we have to do it. People get hurt generally less when you hit a soft surface than you hit a hard surface. That's common experience that we're all aware of. And I'm also particularly concerned as a former member of the Energy Committee when it was intact and the Parks and Rec Committee about not only the safety, but what is the overall environmental impact of the snowball operation to the town of Camden and the community in general. And it's my firm belief that the reduced impacts, the reduced use of diesel fuel, electricity, and the like, labor and all is going to result in a positive environmental benefit from the use of the drift additive as opposed to not using it. We've made a huge investment over the years in the snow bowl, and I think it's incumbent upon us to consider these kinds of options. And I would certainly recommend that the select board vote in favor of the drift additive as an environmentalist, as a ski patroller, and as a member of the Camden community.
Thank you.
If anyone has questions, I doubt it. Thanks.
Allison.
I guess Brian should say up. Is there anything written anywhere that backs up the assertion that the energy use at the Snow Bowl would be less using drift, or what the impact has been elsewhere? What I found interesting is that the ski resorts that use it, none of them are willing to be named. They all, there is nervousness around this, that other ski resorts know that most people have no idea that this is going on. And I'm finding it really interesting to see like, oh, okay, there are these things that we haven't been doing at the Snow Bowl, and maybe that's why it's been a little harder for us. So it's all really helping to round out the picture for me. But, the way that our society works is that the burden of proof is on the victim or the environment or the entity that might be harmed to prove that there was harm done. We haven't set it up to have the chemical have the burden of proof. So, overall, the idea that we haven't heard of any ski resorts having to stop this, or none of that is going to make any difference to me. The type of thing that makes a difference to me is, scientific studies about the rate that things biodegrade and long-term water quality monitoring that's happened in sensitive ponds at the base of ski mountains and things like that. The energy reduction possibilities are intriguing to me, but I'm wondering if that's written somewhere that could be backed up, or if it's just have any mountains done studies on that, or?
I'm not aware of any net mountains that have done studies on that. It is something that if we are permitted to use drift, we would be able to quantify, because we know what our usage is now. We know what our energy usage is without it. We know what our the hours we put on the piston bullies without it. So those are things that are known to us. It's also known to us that moving light things takes less time than moving heavy things. And I don't mean to oversimplify it, but it really is, when you're producing a lighter snow that spreads, it comes out of the snow guns and covers a wider surface area and is lighter. It takes less time and less effort to move it. I was thinking about the question you were asking, and how would I prepare for that? Because it's, it's not something I have data on, but I think, we all live in Maine. We've all shoveled our driveways. And I know that I'm much more excited when I go out there and I can push the snow, and it's the light and fluffy kind of snow. Not, the 6 inches of, I get to the bottom and it's soaking wet and it's just incredibly difficult to push. Right. So I don't have data, Allison. I'd love to.
That all makes all of the benefits make lots of sense to me. What I am concerned about is that I know that we don't have a robust water quality monitoring program for Hosmer Pond. We have a citizen-led, Eric does an awesome job, but it's not something that the town of Camden has heavily invested in. We do kind of the minimum. And so if we don't really have a way to monitor that, we know we're really looking at sort of acute toxicity when we've been talking about this. Like if you pour it on a fish, what happens? And apparently 25% is the threshold there. But when you look at all of the different variables and how this one compound may impact the absorption or distribution of all of the other things that we might be concerned about. There's a reason that it was developed to help in the application of pesticides, for instance. So I guess I feel like I don't have a good enough understanding of how this might impact all of the other things. The other thing that kind of just popped right out at me when I was reading the stuff straight from the manufacturer was that, you don't want to ingest it. And, the risks are in large part would be to the people that are applying it and getting it in their eyes or things like that. And they would obviously have to be trained. But they said the only way that you would ever end up with any of it being ingested would be accidental. And I don't know if any children, it's really hard to get them to stop eating snow. I mean, I think everybody's going to laugh a little bit, but kids sit there and just like eat snow all day. This was the first thing that my son said to me. And I'm always like, no, don't eat any snow because of all the reasons for that. But has that been like, how much snow would a child have to eat for it to reach the level where it's like, meh?
It would likely, water is toxic, right? If you have taken too much water.
Oh yeah, I mean, we can make the everything is toxic argument, but
at 3 parts per million, there was no study done on what is the mortality rate of humans, and for this.
I'm not even looking at mortality. I'm just saying like any kind of negative.
But the toxicity and one of the abstracts that was sent by a concerned citizen about who was against using, or recommended that the board vote not to use it, sent an abstract that and I'll just cite it. It says the very low toxicity of these materials to Daphnia, freshwater fish, marine species, mallard ducks, bobwhite quail, and domestic chickens, and their non-accumulation in the flesh and eggs of chickens and in the flesh of fish minimizes concerns regarding their potential to cause environmental damage. So, this is an environmental research study. This is not, my opinion on it. I would.
But I thought it was interesting that you said that it actually might help with algae growth. So in the pond. And so that to me says this has an impact. How is it gonna, because there are many companies that specialize in treatment of ponds that develop too much algae, and they treat those with chemicals, and it absolutely helps with the algae growth. Aluminum sulfate will do that, and it binds everything, and it causes it to sink to the bottom, and it's sort of like puts the problem on hold. But so to me, when I hear you say that something might help, that starts to trigger again, like, okay, so there are all these different interactions that we might not be aware of. I'm not alleging that this is gonna, I think there's no chance that this is gonna cause some kind of immediate thing where we're gonna see fish dying or, ducks not reproducing, or it's clear it's a low toxicity item, and that there are probably many things that are ending up in the pond that might be of greater concern, like the PFAS from ski wax, for instance, or, but is there a way that we could, I would like to see some kind of an entity that's designated to look at it over a season and provide a more robust recommendation. It feels to me like it's a lot for us to decide to do, as non-experts. How detrimental is it if we haven't been doing it for all of this time? What's the impact of starting this year, versus starting next year? Or, could the Conservation Commission be asked to take a look at it? Or it just feels like, the lack of evidence of harm is not evidence, that there is no harm. And
Yeah, I had a friend of mine take a look as well at what was out there. And as we know, it's limited amount of information, but one of the things that's potentially out there is negative impact to bees that they're seeing in the almond industry that uses this to put on pesticides. And it's probably, I don't know what the levels are that they go ahead and they do that
0.2%.
with. Oh,
It's 0.2%. And it was sprayed directly on them. So the surfactant is used. So there was a study done in California because the surfactant is used in the treatment of almonds. And in the almond, and at the same time, they use honeybees in order to help to pollinate the almond field. So had a 0.2% rate of the use of the surfactant sprayed onto the honeybees that had a potential to increase the lethality rate of the honeybees.
And that's about how many percent more than what you'd be using?
A much higher percentage than significantly higher percent than what we would be using. It is, at 3 parts per million, it is, that's equivalent to 3 milligrams per liter of water. It is an incredibly low rate. The other thing to note is, my wife's a beekeeper. And so I know from history, from personal experience, when we are making snow, there will not be honeybees that are at risk of being impacted by an aerosolized surfactant. They're just not there at the time. This very small window when we would be using this product, which is, when temperatures are cold and the bees are all, hiding in their hives at that point. But I did read that study and because that was the first thing I found that talked about any potential negative impact as a result of it. It was interesting to read that they talked about that it may increase the lethality, that it was not definitively stated that it does, and that the concentrations that it took in order to do that were significantly higher. It's used, the reason that surfactants are used so predominantly in agriculture is the same reason we want to use it. It breaks down the water tension, the surface tension of water. And what that does is we think about if you're trying to spray plants with either a pesticide or with a fertilizer, you're going to get a much more even coating with flat water than you are with water that is not flat, that is bound together and that has higher surface tension. So it's the same reason why it's used medicinally, and it's the same reason why it's used in household products, cleaning products, because of how that it will cover, create the coverage that it needs. So, from my perspective, the information that we have about the low toxicity levels, about the fact that it is dispersible in water, that there is no naturally occurring event where it will accumulate at greater than how it's distributed. To me, that is evidence, that is fact, that's not disputable. The risk from my perspective is really making sure we have the right controls in place so that the drift is kept in locked storage, that the people that are putting the drift into that water solution, that they have the appropriate chemical impervious gloves. And even though respirators are not required, if you read the technical bulletin, we will have our snowmakers wear respirators and protective glasses, and make sure that that process is controlled. Because to me, having spoken with industry experts, having spoken with the chemist, having read all the information that I can read, that's the risk. The risk is to the snowmakers through either inhalation or ingestion. And And although that risk is really, really small, it's minimal, it's a risk. And, what I've shared with, when we had our snowball orientation, what I shared with that group and what I've shared with the snowball leadership team is that when I think about my priorities, my number one priority is the safety of our employees and of our guests. If we don't get that right, nothing else matters. And if I didn't think that we could do this safely for our employees, for our guests, and for the environment, again, I would not be up here talking with you about it, making this recommendation.
On an administrative note, with use of this product, do we have to make any change to the insurance agreement or program that we have because of using this product? Do you know?
Not that I'm
Have we
aware of.
looked?
No,
Have we checked
we use a lot of,
stuff?
yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Ken.
Tom
has a question,
Thanks,
too.
Jeff. I very much appreciate your presentation and the new information tonight. And it's gratifying to know that you really want to be a good neighbor and a good participant in Camden. I live on Hosmer Pond, and I read all the reports, and it's not zero risk, it's low risk, and it gives me the willies. And perhaps just it's an emotional response, but whatever goes up the mountain comes down the mountain, and the fish swim and the ducks swim, and I swim in that pond. So I have reservations about an additive which is not necessary. It'll help. I mean, it'll help in marginal conditions. If it made all the difference, if the snowball is going to be in the black if we used it, and in the red if we didn't, there would be a different argument. But it's a marginal effect, and there are remote. And I realize that if the risk weren't remote, you wouldn't even be considering it. But that is my concern at the moment, is that it's not a zero factor. So.
Can I thank you. I do want to be a good partner to and a good neighbor to Hosmer Pond, and I am aware of the history, and perhaps there have been times where the snowball has not been the best neighbor through unintended consequences. It's not my intent. It's not my desire. I want to be a good neighbor. I wonder where we draw the line, however, right? Because if I look at the SDS sheet for gasoline and I look at the SDS sheet for drift, I'm much more concerned about gasoline and petroleum-based products. And we allow boats with motors in public waters in Camden. Based on the SDS sheet, if I were to dump the equivalent amount of gasoline into Hosmer Pond that I do drift, the environmental impact would be much greater. And yet, to my knowledge, we do allow motorized boats, in that area. So I don't. It's not me trying to be dismissive of your concerns whatsoever. It's for me. It's where do we draw that line? I'm not prepared to sit here today and say the snowball is at risk if we don't use drift. But I'm also not here prepared to say it's not at risk if we don't use drift.
Jeff, sorry to interrupt, but Tom has a question too, and he might be able to.
Sorry, Tom. I didn't see you there.
That's okay. Nope.
No, it's fine. I appreciate all the input, and I'm listening. It is a chemical synthetic, which is the opposite direction we've been going lately with the new pesticides ordinance that we passed. So I do have concerns about it. I do think that it is, based on what I've been able to read myself, it is relatively low impact, just like Jeff is saying. Certainly, gasoline engines in ponds, they definitely leak, like the gas tanks and that sort of thing. It's a good point. So on the scale of where it falls, it's certainly debatable. Jeff, has any thought been put into alternatives? I know that snowmaking is a process that the people who get good at it are kind of scientists in the making of it. I understand water pressure is an aspect of it, and a higher water pressure sometimes can allow snowmaking at different humidity levels or different temperatures. Also, I understand that there might be out there some organic nucleating agents. I don't know about the availability or cost of those. Has any thought been put into alternatives to achieve the same benefit?
Yes. So we looked at a biological agent, and quite frankly, it didn't take too long to rule that one out based on what I saw at the time and the comparison between the risks between the two. I think introducing something biological, that has more uncertainty from my perspective as reading through the data. Drift is the more commonly used.
Jeff, if you don't mind me interjecting, drift is cheaper for certain. So that has to do with some of the common usage. I'm curious if there's been any research by the Snow Bowl, or if we could find anything out about an organic nucleating agent that might be out there that could achieve the same benefit. Organic being the key word.
I can certainly look into it, Tom. I'm not prepared to talk to an organic nucleating agent today.
My preference would be to try to achieve the same benefit with a more environmentally sustainable technique, if such a thing exists. And if it doesn't, I'm calling on someone to invent it.
Allison?
I mean, I think sometimes the impact of organic additives can be even greater. And so that is an important thing. For me, I'm concerned about making sure that the town does more for the long-term, sustainable high water quality of Hosmer Pond. And so to me, if we haven't even cared enough as a town to invest in, watershed management studies for the Hosmer Pond and Goose River watershed, if we're not doing, phosphorus monitoring, if we're not doing a lot of the things that are very common in other places that have significant resources like this, we just do very, very, very little, like the bare minimum, an embarrassing amount that is citizen driven. And so I could, get behind supporting something like this if I knew that we were also really doing a good job with all of the monitoring. But to me, it feels like we're just winging it in that area. And so it makes me uncomfortable in this area. So I'd like to see something in the budget, in whether we use drift or not. I think it's clear that every time something like this comes up, we see a really high level of concern from the community. I've gotten tons of comments about this issue. And I am kind of like, you know what, guys, this is actually really low on the concern level. There are much bigger environmental concerns in Camden right now, things that are getting into the water all the time, way, way, way worse than drift. So I do roll my eyes a lot. I didn't see you rolling your eyes, Jeff, but I imagine some of you are like, okay, guys, So, I get that, but I'm just not seeing that we are taking this whole water quality issue as seriously as we should be. So
Okay.
I guess that would be mine.
Jeff, you've made I appreciate your presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming prepared and reviewing the data that is available. And we do need to vote on whether or not we're going to use it, but regardless of how the vote goes, don't take it to diminish any amount of enthusiasm you have for trying to do some new things. I appreciate your presentation tonight.
I appreciate the opportunity to talk about it, and we'll figure something out, right?
I mean, I guess I also I don't know that I feel like voting on it. I would like to revisit it. I think that I probably don't have a full perspective. Hearing what Brian said tonight in particular was like, oh, okay. If Brian thinks that, then maybe I should think differently too. So I would like to look at it more robustly and not just send this out as a no if that's the wrong decision. But I would like a mechanism for it to be studied a little bit more. I don't know if there's any appetite for that, sort of along the lines of what Tom said with, let's look at an organic option. Are we using this because it's cheaper, or, is there something more expensive that would eliminate some of the concerns? I guess I'm saying that I would like to know.
If we delay
More.
our vote too long, then obviously, if we wait till mid-March, we're too late.
I'm just saying I want to revisit it. It's something that I don't want to shut the door on forever. But I personally need more information. I also would like to recognize that I don't think this ever came to a select board vote before when it was used. So it's one of these things that probably is just happening at an administrative level and was in the past at the Snow Bowl. Because I did a quick search to see if that had ever been a discussion item, and it hadn't. And so because Jeff very transparently said, here's everything that we're doing over there. And we were like, hold on, what, wait, we're scared of this thing. So I appreciate you doing it. I want to make sure that it's not like the uneducated people that are making the decision that's, so I would like to review it at a later time after it's been, some more information has been presented. I don't know if anybody has an appetite for that, but I'd happily put money in the budget to study, water quality impacts of the Snow Bowl on Hosmer Pond. I have a particular concern about PFAS because that's what they are finding at all these ski mountains. They're testing and they're finding that even aquifers, we have a little pond sitting right there, but they're finding contaminated aquifers and tracing it back to ski mountains because of the wax. That is a much bigger concern. So, I mean, I'd like to see us put some money in the budget, test Hosmer Pond more robustly, commit to doing that into the future. And as part of that, maybe consider one of these additives.
Allison, may I just you have clarity, and Tom does as well. When I made the decision to recommend Drift and no other products, at that point, I wasn't even aware of the cost of Drift. It was, let's figure out what we want to use and then how much it was going to cost. So I just want to make sure that it's clear that my decision was not based on which one was going to be less expensive. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any sort of motion on this action item or not? Go ahead, Ken.
I wish there were a way to give a soft answer, but it should be an up or down so that Jeff knows how to proceed.
I mean, you could choose to table it and direct us to
But do buy us
do
2 more
more
weeks?
research and come
But
back.
it's not going to be a 2 more week situation. It's going to take some.
And we'll commit to not using it until there's a formal decision made.
My preference is to do a little more research on other products, other techniques. I understand that the injection system might be different if we choose something else. There might be other costs associated, but my preference would be to investigate this more thoroughly, both the impacts and the alternatives.
And practically speaking, it might take us a little bit longer than the season.
Right.
I mean, maybe some of the other ski mountains, after they see some newspaper article written about this, or maybe they'd be willing to share some of any studies that they've done. My sense is that they just really haven't done them. It seems like there hasn't really been all that much research, but
Yeah,
So-
one question, Jeff, how many years it's been since Jeff Cooler was involved, that we've used it? So we haven't used it for 10 years or more?
Well, the product was made in 2001 is when the product was made, according to the articles.
Yeah, Tom, I don't know when Jeff used it last. So,
it was already, I heard it was something that was already at the snowball that was found.
yeah, well, so the injection system is already there, right? And we didn't put that in. That's been there for, for a period of time. And we have drift without purchasing any. We haven't used it. We're not going to use it until such time as hopefully we get the approval to do so. But we have drift we've had there since the last time we used it.
Probably a dozen years or more, if it's since Jeff passed away.
Yeah.
Okay.
Interesting.
So do we have a motion to get this on to
I
the
would,
next
I
item?
would move that we defer the decision or go ahead to use drift until further study can be done. If you need a motion.
I second.
Any further discussion? And therefore, the motion stands to not use it now, but to basically research it
Right.
and revisit at another time.
Yep.
Not
think they're probably-
not necessarily this season.
Not necessarily this season. If somebody comes and, somebody's going to have to decide when it's worthy of coming back on an agenda. And I'm guessing some people that are listening right now that are like, oh my gosh, those people, I can't believe what they said. And they're going to pull together some information if there's better stuff out there and they're going to send it to us. And, we can talk, I can make my motion at the budget committee time again about studying it more, or can see when it bubbles to the surface, but agree to revisit it if there's more information.
So the motion on the table essentially again is to not use it and to study it and consider it at a later date after further study.
I'd like to direct the staff to, and really interested parties to both study impacts and find alternatives, so that we can make a full assessment.
Yeah, I agree. It would be great if, maybe Camden can look at some of those energy implications if, there are variables we're not considering. That was all really interesting. Are we ready?
All right. So again, are we ready for a vote? So those who would like to not use drift this season, that's the motion, because the motion is to not.
That wasn't the motion. Allison said table it until we have further information. It wasn't for this season.
Okay.
If we get information back quickly, I just think we have a motion made and seconded and we vote on that motion rather than
That's right.
parse the words. It's already been made.
Yeah.
I was trying to get clarity on what that motion ended up.
I think it was clear that we're not giving the approval, that we're deferring the decision to a later date after further study can be done.
Yes, you are
Very good.
tabling it. You've asked us to
Table it.
bring back.
Very good. So.
Well, great.
vote-
Yeah.
So the vote again is on deciding to table the issue, and those in favor of tabling the issue.
Tabling the issue and for
Please.
further study. I'm just not sure why you're trying to turn it into this kind
Well,
of
we
thing
just
where
wanna
it's
make
like,
sure that people know what they're voting yes or no to. That's all. And it's a vote, again, those
think
who
we
want
know.
to table it,
you can vote no on the motion if you think it's too.
that's fine.
If you're trying to shut the door and I think we should never, ever use this, no matter
No.
what information comes to us, then you should
That's
vote
it.
no. I mean,
No, the motion is to table it to a later date,
to allow for further study.
to allow for further study. That's
Right.
correct.
What she said.
Yeah. Those in favor of tabling? Awesome. 4-0.
Let the minutes reflect
Yes,
how it was
the
originally worded.
Right. Good thing that AI thing is doing its thing. Thank you,
Right.
Jeff, for your comments. Now, we did have another item that we moved from the consent agenda
I move that
to
we-
an action item on the approval of commercial fishermen applications. You have a
I think Audra,
suggestion?
yeah, I'm going to move that we table the, approval of the commercial fishermen's float licenses
I'll second that. if I
for
can.
further study.
I-
Just tabling, no.
Stop it.
Until a robust study.
But well, what, I just want to make sure, what is the reason why we're going to table this particular item?
Just so you can get all the licenses in your packet and you can see all
Yeah,
the.
normally we don't just have a memo that says the harbor committee argued about this for 2 hours and then normally we have all of the applications and
Okay.
just want to,
Make sure that we have all the data that we have, all the
Yep.
applications.
I think, I mean, I didn't recommend tabling. Audra said maybe we,
That's a good
Should.
idea.
I mean,
Yeah.
We'll come back at the first January meeting. We'll have all the
The first
licenses
January
in your
meeting?
packet.
Right, and
Okay.
the fishermen won't be using the floats between now and then, so.
No, actually, last year we did something similar, not for the same reason, but it was the first January meeting by the time they had their
Okay.
licenses approved.
Very good.
it's a low enforcement environment out there right now, I think, anyway.
So the, again, the motions,
Steve Bixley's at the snow bowl pushing around heavy snow.
Right.
Sorry. I move that we table the approval of the commercial fishermen float licenses.
I'll second that.
all in favor? 4-0, table the approval of commercial fishermen applications until the first meeting in January, where the applications can be in the packet. That's awesome.
Mhm.
Next up are our discussion items. The first piece is the presentation by Maine Water on a request to the Public Utilities Commissions for a rate increase.
That sounds so ominous. I was hoping it could also more just be a little bit of an update from the Maine Water Company on some of the stuff that they're doing. So,
I think they're more comprehensive than what's
right,
on
it's
the
not
agenda.
There you
supposed
go.
to be like a
Yes.
PUC environment necessarily.
We all set then?
Yes, thank you.
Oh.
Is the presentation somewhere on,
So it'll,
I
it'll,
think we're not all set, actually, it looks like, because is there
it's
present?
not connected. Oh, I see why that's happening.
Sometimes it's a simple solution.
Sometimes Jeff just pulls the plug.
there we
Yeah,
go.
that-
Very animated while he was presenting.
All right. So good evening. My name's Mark Vanoy. I'm president of Maine Water Company. With me tonight is Michael Cummins, our vice president of operations, and Justin Edelstein, who's our financial controller. So you get the whole team this evening.
Wow.
A little bit about Maine Water. We have been in this business since 1880 in the Mid-Coast. We currently run a number of systems around the state. We have 18 public water systems that we either own or operate, stretching from Millinocket down to Berwick and out to Vinyl Haven. We have 5 regional operation centers that we base our operations out of, and we serve 32,000 customers across the state, and we have 80 employees. I myself am fairly local. I'm down in the Mid-Coast in Waldoboro. Mike is from the town of Camden, and Justin lives here in Camden. So local team. I'll let Mike talk a bit about our operations team, and then I will get to the rate case.
Yeah, thank you, and appreciate the opportunity to be here tonight. An opportunity to talk about the water system and talk about the work that goes into running a water system. To start in the Camden area, we're really fortunate to have the water source that we have in Mirror Lake. We refer to it as crystal clear Mirror Lake. It's been the primary source of this community since the late 1800s, and it's a significant source. We have a treatment facility that didn't have filtration until 2010 because of the great water quality. And we have a state-of-the-art facility that's operated by licensed professionals every single day. It has a max capacity right now of 5.6 million gallons per day, and it could be built out to 6 million gallons per day. You see up on the screen the towns that are served. Camden is obviously one of them. 7,800 service connections for our customers across a pretty vast distribution system for the state of Maine. 160 miles of main, 530 fire hydrants that we own and operate every day. In the summertime, we're producing 4 or more million gallons per day. With the increase in population, irrigation going on, we're putting a lot of water out, and then that slows down, and our facility has the ability to ramp up and slow down. We have 6 treatment plant operators that carry certifications that are rather stringent. You have to study and pass the exams and then do continuing education for the rest of your career to hold those licenses. And in the state of Maine and in the United States, treatment operators are hard to come by. So we're really proud of the ones that we've been able to grow here and keep here at Maine Water Company, serving the community. And then we have 9 field service reps that you see out and about the system every day, doing all the great work. And so there's a lot of things that go on. The folks who work for us and that I have the pleasure to work with, they're available 24/7. So we have an on-call staff that responds 24/7 to a treatment plant alarm or challenge that might pop up, or a water main break. And that can be on Christmas morning, and that can be in the middle of the night on the coldest night of the year, and they're there. We do a lot of work around infrastructure replacement. This system the distribution system was put in the late 1800s and early 1900s. So think about that. And so we have a master plan that our engineering team and our operations team put together, and we go to work on that, and we work closely with the town of Camden to make sure that we're hitting the same spots at the same time. And you've seen that on Pearl Street, on Atlantic Ave recently, on Rawson Avenue. Those are areas that we identified that were in need of replacement, and they were disrupting the service of customers. We do valve maintenance. We do all of the hydrant flushing to keep great water quality, leak detection to find those leaks that aren't surfacing. We have equipment and trained operators that are able to do that. And then, something that really goes unseen is all of the great work that goes on around water quality. Yesterday was the 50th anniversary of the Federal Safe Drinking Water Act. Before 1974, there were no federal primary standards for drinking water. And each and every day, our operators and our water quality team make sure that we live up to the standard of the Safe Drinking Water Act. And when we don't, you know about it. So if you haven't heard from us about our water quality, and you haven't gotten to read our water quality report yet, there's a lot of great work that goes into keeping this system in compliance and keeping the water safe to drink. And then we have a consolidated back office that serves the full state, located here in Rockport and located in Saco, that does the customer service, the billing, the engineering, and the financial work as well. So there's a team of 80 people who have one mission, but different professions that serve us very well. And then our work around land conservation, specifically with the Coastal Mountains Land Trust, and we also put our staff to volunteer as well. We have days every year where we partner with local organizations and do work in the community, and we find that our employees are pretty excited to do that as well. And so this is a quick look at our treatment facility. I'm not going to go through the process diagram, but when I talk about the Safe Drinking Water Act, we just did a coagulation program to improve water quality in regards to the Safe Drinking Water Act. So we're always looking ahead lowering risks and making sure that each and every day the water that goes out the door is safe to drink. We recently had an open house. So if anybody didn't make the open house and wants a chance to see the facility, we would certainly invite the select board and invite anybody watching. If you want to see the facility, we'd certainly love to show it to you. And then I think it's important for those who don't know to understand how we're regulated and what the framework is around that. The EPA, they're the ones who hold the rules of the Safe Drinking Water Act and have it in the federal register. Okay, and so at the national level, they have the standards, and then in Maine, at the CDC, the Maine Drinking Water Program holds primacy to enforce those rules right here in Maine. So every day, every month, we have reports that we need to submit to stay in compliance. It's highly regulated, and we have a good reputation with our regulators because we're transparent and we follow the rules. And also, I mentioned licensed water operators. That's also a requirement of the Safe Drinking Water Act. And here in Maine, Maine sets the requirements for the exams and the training. So we do a good job there. And then the Consumer Confidence Report, that's our water quality report that's published annually. That's also a requirement. We try to make that user-friendly. That's located on our website. So for anybody who wants to take a look, that shows the previous year's water quality and how it matches up to the standards. And then the Maine Public Utilities Commission, and Mark is going to talk about our rate filing, but they regulate the financial side of the house. And then there's the Maine Office of the Public Advocate, who represents customers in a rate proceeding. So that's a little bit of who we are and how we work. And I'm going to turn it back over to Mark.
Great, thanks, Mike. So as we said, we did file a rate case with the Maine Public Utilities Commission, and we met with the towns involved in that process as we got ready to file it. And there are a couple things going on in that rate case. One, we made a number of infrastructure investments across the system, and the reality of that is when you make those kind of investments, there's going to be a recovery mechanism that we need to put in place in the form of rates. The second area that we really focused on in this rate case was a cost of service study. And we did the cost of service study because we have a large industrial customer on this system in Rockland, where we saw a lot of intermittent shutdowns through the course of 23. So we wanted to look at that customer with respect to how the rates are applied there and look at more of a fixed charge because the system is set up to serve them a significant amount of water. And if they're not taking the water, that has an impact on us and has an impact on other customers, and it actually has an impact on our service because of the pressures that we see in the system. So the cost of service study sought to address that large industrial customer in a way that would not affect our other residential rates. Really a way to keep residential rates whole in the process and not move those costs to residential. So that was really the focus of the cost of service study. And through that process, we applied for an 11% increase in residential rates, a 7% increase in public fire rates. And when you look at those totals on the residential side, that's $11.59 a quarter for your average customer. So if you back that out on a monthly basis, that's about $4 a month is what we're looking to recover through this rate case. I'm happy to entertain questions on the rate case. I guess the last part of this would be a future proceeding that we are looking to file with the Maine Public Utility Commission. And this future proceeding is to look at a unified rate structure across all the divisions of Maine Water. So we're at a point in time right now where our largest divisions, which would be the Camden Rockland division and the Biddeford Saco division, are pretty close to rate parity right now. And as we look at the future and look at the different risks that are involved in the future, both from a water quality standpoint, I heard PFAS mentioned earlier this evening. With extremely low limits on that, you're really a sample away from having a positive and then having to treat for it. To date, we're non-detect at Mirror Lake, which is a good thing, but PFAS is ubiquitous in the environment. So there are a lot of regulatory things coming at us where we think that if we went to a unified rate structure with the full 30,000 customers involved, you could mitigate the ups and downs better and smooth out potential rate impacts to customers. If I think of this specific system, I talked a little bit about the risk of a large industrial customer. If that large industrial customer went away, the system, we wouldn't change the design of the system. We'd still have to serve with a much lower use rate. Well, the cost of service is not so much in producing each gallon of water or volumetric costs. It's in the infrastructure. It's in the water pipes. It's in the things that are in the ground. So we'd still have to deal with that. So I see that unified rate structure as a way to lower the risk to each of our customers going forward. But it's certainly an area that we're happy to talk about. That proceeding, we look to file probably the end of the year. It's going to wind its way through the Public Utilities Commission through 2 phases. The first phase would be just looking at the policy considerations around it and initial financial calculations around what a unified rate would look like. And then the second phase of that would be after taking input from both the commission, the public advocate, and others who want to be involved, we could actually shape a rate that made sense for everybody. That would be our goal. Happy to take questions.
What is the impact to towns on the fire hydrant side?
So it's a 7% increase. I don't have the math right in front of me, but I can get back to you on that, provide it.
I mean, considering we already pay something like $250,000 a year, and there have been increases sort of as we've gone along. When was the last increase in that?
Yeah, so we file what are called water infrastructure surcharges, which is a surcharge over the regular rate. And what it does is when we do replacement of water main pipes, there's a limit on it. It can only be 3% a year, 10% between rate cases. So we will file those, and then they'll be looked at when we get to the next rate case. They'll make their way into the rate base that is allowed for recovery in the rate case and get zeroed out. So it's kind of an incremental charge along the way to the next rate case, and then it gets all looked at. So yes, fire charges are a significant part of the revenue across the system. Part of the cost of service study actually was to make sure that the fire charge allocation was reasonable. So one of the things that the Public Utilities Commission, one of their rules for water systems is that fire charges be 30% of the total revenue requirement of a system, unless you do a cost of service study. And if you do a cost of service study and can show that the reasonable amount should be less than that based on how the system is used and the size of pipes and storage and fires and what you need as far as firefighting goes. And this cost of service study actually lowered that number to, I think it's 24 or 25% of the total revenue requirement. So less than the 30% in rule.
Yeah, so I mean, I've been going through the PUC website, and there's bajillions of documents, and I think the cost of service study document is a spreadsheet, and there are a lot of documents to try to weed through. A few months ago, a few citizens were concerned, having looked at the part of the town budget that is it's called fire hydrant rental is the way it's worded there. And we learned from I guess maybe it was the public advocate liaison to the public course. There was some position that was designed to talk to people like us. And she explained really what's behind that hydrant rental stuff. And it was more complicated than I realized. And she explained how the rate case worked and explained that the last one was a while ago. But looking through all these documents, what strikes me is that, the corporate structure of Maine Water is, you're owned by the SJW group, and it's the largest investor-owned water utility in the country or close to it?
I don't think it's the largest investor
But
in
it's
water
pretty, so it's pretty
utility.
big. And so there were a lot of
It's large.
concerns that the PUC had about that merger. The Connecticut Water Company, which owns Maine Water and then was acquired or merged with the SJW group. And so you have a guaranteed return basically on these investments that you make. And there's a need to, there is somewhat, is it 10% on capital improvements?
We're not guaranteed a return. So
Basically,
there is a
you're a really
return.
profitable company. It's the system has to be a monopoly because we can't just have a bunch of competing water companies all around. And I think we've been really lucky to have really competent people that are invested in the community, here making the decisions, drinking the water. But in terms of, there's not a lot of, looking at the reasons that your last increase was denied, when I read the commission's, or partially, it was approved in part and denied in part. And when they went through all of the reasons, I was like, oh my God, it's just so complicated for the average person to understand. And so I was just trying to figure out how can I digest all of these documents to understand, okay, this is what they did in Camden, this is what they did here, these are the investments that were made, this is how much it costs. Of course, everybody understands that we don't want the water company to operate at a loss. We want you to be able to hire good people, to do good work, to make investments. I'm thrilled that you seem to have somewhat fixed the disinfection byproduct issue, which I think a lot of people really weren't aware of, that we had pretty high levels that were bordering on being violations of the Safe Drinking Water Act. And so glad that you're able to do that. But how do we make sure that there's not so much pressure being exerted from the larger corporate structure that, basically we know that everything you're doing is needed. It's just a phenomenally profitable company, I guess. And I feel like there's an idea here that it's like, oh, this little Maine company, but it is making a lot of money for shareholders. And so how do we make sure that the money is being best invested in town so that I think people have a voice in, what kind of treatment technology might be used, or which roads, which roads or which pipes underneath which roads are going to be fixed. I guess a shorter way to ask my question is, which documents would you recommend starting with if somebody just kind of wanted to understand what Maine Water's plan is? What investments have you made in our area in the recent past, and what is planned in the future? I think would be helpful.
Yes, we have a master plan for the system, and we can certainly share that master plan with you. We renew those master plans periodically, usually around 10 years.
Okay.
And the current master plan in Camden Rockland is maybe 2 years old now.
Okay.
So
great.
it's a breathing, living document that we really work hard to keep up to date and to work with town officials on what their priorities are so that we're not going after the wrong road at the wrong time, and making sure that we're coordinated in those efforts. Be happy to share that with you.
I have a lot of people contact me that are like, I can't believe the town is doing this. And I just so frequently say, oh, that's actually the water company. That's the water company on Rawson Avenue. That's the, so there's a little bit of, I don't want to say resentment built up, but a little bit of like, just people think that the town is responsible and has this like vast control over everything the water company does. And, it's a separate entity and you guys make separate decisions.
Yeah, and if there are concerns, I mean, we have a team. We want to meet the public where those concerns are and address them, because we really are a transparent, open book.
Audrey, do you have any questions for the water company on this subject too, or no?
No, but I can answer your question about the dollar amount increase. It's about $19,000.
Yeah.
And then is there an escalation built into that with inflation or?
No, there isn't.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear Chris's question.
Yeah,
Are we
I'm
talking
sorry. I was
fire
just
hydrants
asking.
now?
Thank you, Tom. I didn't have the mic on. I was just asking Audra if she had any questions specific.
Yeah,
presentation.
that's what I'd like to know. Just a little bit more of a detailed breakdown about the fire hydrants. It comes up every budgeting season. It's a hefty bill, and we're always just told that this is what it is. So I heard you say the POC allows 30% of certain costs, but with your studies, you've been able to reduce it to 24% in our area. Could we just get a little bit more detail on that?
Yes, certainly. As part of the cost of service study, we looked at how water is used, what size of pumps are necessary to fight fires, what size of storage is necessary to fight fires, what size of pipes are necessary to fight fires. And a cost allocation study looks at that compared to, say, a residential use and the peaks associated with the residential use, and says, okay, if you have these pipes in the ground, a portion of that pipe is really all that would have, if we were designing a system around residential use, you'd probably have 2 to 4 inch pipes. But when you're designing around fire flows of 1,500 gallons a minute, that's a very different pipe size. So the cost of service study works through all the elements of the system and assigns an allocation factor based on those pieces of infrastructure, and then works through, other aspects of billing, of customer service, and things of that nature, which would be more on the residential side when you think of the allocation factors associated with those, and draws that all up into a series of allocations around, what aspect of the service should be bearing the cost of that service. And that's what the cost of service study does. And in working through that, we were able to go from, a former cost of service that was closer to the 30% down to 24 to 25%. It still resulted in an increase in fire charges for Camden of 7%, which from the conversation, Audra just mentioned what that number works out to, and maybe you could repeat that.
$17,000.
$17,000.
Do you have a breakdown somewhere of the investments that have been made in Camden that were used to justify the
total? Yes. So the lagoon is a major investment that was made at Mirror Lake, and that relates to the disinfection byproduct treatment.
When did that go online?
So that went online in January of last year.
So are we seeing that in the 2023 water quality report, or?
So
When?
Remind me when the coagulant went online. It went online in 2022. Along with the lagoon. Sorry. Coagulant went online in 2022. The lagoon went online in January of 24.
What's the coagulant?
So
Is that an additive or?
Yeah. So maybe the detail on the disinfection byproducts, maybe that would be the way to talk about it, is for the disinfection byproduct issue that we were seeing increased rain intensity, creating more total organic carbon in Mirror Lake. That total organic carbon load interacts with chlorine, our disinfectant, creates in the distribution system disinfection byproducts, which are a primary drinking water standard. And as you mentioned, we were creeping up on that, and we were looking for ways to treat that. So we worked with an engineer on that issue and actually came up with a great solution that was actually written up in American Water Works Association's journal. So we're pretty excited about it. And that solution was just a very small dose of a coagulant.
Which one?
Which, I'm sorry?
Which one?
Help me with the actual technical name of the coagulant. I can get that for you. I can get it for you.
Great.
And what that did was it allowed us at the membrane filters to remove some of that total organic carbon load. So by lowering the total organic carbon, we had less interaction with the disinfectant, resulting in about a 50% reduction in disinfection byproducts in the system.
So is that like what they do in the lake? That's like aluminum sulfate when they put that in Chickawaukee, and it takes away it's going to make all that stuff sink before it gets to your system?
It's a small injection right as the raw water, just before the raw water hits the filter. And all it does is cause the particles to start to clump before they hit the filter. And it allows the filter to be more effective in removing the total organic carbon.
I think that is actually the same, but just on a
It may
different
be.
kind of
I'm
scale,
just
but yeah.
trying to explain
Okay.
the process that we're using. But if you would like to come see
you're
it or
not-
sit down with our water quality manager and go through the details of that, I'd be happy to host you.
So you did that, but then that wasn't quite enough, and so you did the lagoon?
No,
Or
so the lagoon is part of that overall treatment scheme because the system was built with a rather small lagoon, and it recirculates. So when you wash the filters off, that wash water goes to the lagoon. That system is not on any wastewater treatment or sewers, so it recycles to the front of the treatment process from the lagoon and reruns through the treatment process. So very low waste coming off the filters. But what we found was when we did the cleanings of the filters with higher chlorine levels and so forth, that is a periodic wash, not just the backwash of the filters, but the clean in place of the filters. That had elevated chlorine levels that were then getting recirced, which then caused a DBP issue. So we never crossed the standards. We never violated any rules. I want to be real clear on that based on your questions and your quizzical look. But it definitely elevated DBPs. So as part of the solution of this more comprehensive plan, we added a coagulant and we added a lagoon. And that has seen that 50% reduction.
there were exceedances before when you didn't have to, with the averaging but I mean, it's fine. There have been times when you've exceeded those, but you don't have any plan to use chloramine at all. That had been my major concern, that a lot of water systems, when they face this issue, they switch to chloramine rather than chlorine, and it just produces a different class of disinfection byproducts that is unregulated.
So we evaluated when we were looking at two solutions, going to chloramines or going to the solution that we chose. We chose the other solution. So no intent to chloraminate.
And that the other solution is probably more expensive.
Which
right?
other solution?
The one you chose. I'm imagining, no?
I'm not.
No, which I would say is I think it's great that you're not. I think you made the right decision. I would imagine it would be more expensive to do this than to.
I don't think it.
No?
No, I don't think it would have, because the chloramination would have required. I think regardless of what we did, we would have ultimately had to do something about the lagoon.
Okay.
In either solution, and the lagoon is where the majority of the money is.
So that was one major investment. And then.
Yeah, some others. So Pearl Street was mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
The work on Pearl Street. And maybe you want to walk
Is
through
there
the other.
somewhere like a breakdown of like, this is what this cost us, this is what this cost us? I think you have to provide that in some way to the PUC.
Yeah, there's a total in the revenue,
Just so I don't waste everybody's time tonight with like all these tiny questions.
in the model that we provided to the PUC, there's a breakdown of the rate base, and it goes through each of the projects that are moved into rate base. And those would include these street projects of pipe replacement. But we can provide you directly, if that would be helpful, what those projects were and the costs.
And then in terms of things that you're planning for the future?
Yes. So in terms of what we're planning for the future, I can provide you the master plan, which will outline the future.
And can I ask you a quick question? So by virtue of sitting here through this whole meeting, you had to hear about some of our sewer expansion projects. Were any of those a surprise to you?
I thought you were going to ask him about drift.
I'm going to dodge any questions about
Should we
drift.
do it?
Were any of those a surprise to you? And I guess, do you feel like we kind of set you scrambling at all with any of them?
No, I don't think so. I think we work very closely with your public works director and identify and, make
You
sure
just
that we're
never
moving
know.
forward
There's like
together.
a lot of opportunities for these to slip through the cracks. So
Sure. So we,
While you're here and listening, I thought I'd ask.
I'll just speak because I oversee our operations and engineering team. That expansion was not a surprise. We were well aware of it. So appreciate it.
Is there a defined process where, like that master plan document, is that available online anywhere? Do you send that to?
So we do, you probably have a copy of it because we provide it to the towns that we operate in, but it is critical infrastructure. And from a protection standpoint of water critical infrastructure, I would not make that a public document.
Makes sense.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Can I see it?
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah, if I could ask just some rudimentary questions. So 100% of your revenue comes from the fees you charge for water. Is that roughly accurate?
Yeah, so it's very close to accurate, but I want to be sure that you understand we do contract operations of some systems.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's part of our revenue stream as well, but it's water related. Yes.
So you're asking the Maine PUC for an 11% increase, and that goes to basically to individuals and a different rate for municipal use. That's why you're here tonight to present to us an 11%.
Yes.
rate.
Yes. So residential is 11%.
Yeah. You used a couple of terms, rate parity and unified rate structure. Maybe
Yeah.
give me a short explanation of what.
Yeah, sure. So as we indicated earlier, we operate in 23 different communities across the state. Our two largest operations are the Camden Rockland system, and the other large one is Biddeford-Saco. So when I said rate parity, we're at a point where the rates in Biddeford-Saco are very close to the rates in Camden Rockland. So that's what I meant by rate parity in the two largest systems. There was one other question you had in there, and I want to address it.
Unified rate structure.
Yeah, so unified rate structure. So we are proposing, and we haven't filed this yet, to file a petition to the Maine Public Utility Commission to explore the idea of a unified rate structure across Maine's operating footprint, Maine Water's operating footprint. So because we're at relative rate parity in the two biggest towns or systems, I think it's a good time to explore it. And I think there are some positives that come to all the towns, and I talked about those real briefly. But those would be that I think we can face the future of impending regulatory requirements and threats to water systems as a whole better than we can as individual systems. In part.
Yeah, great.
But that's something for us all to think about and talk about.
Rather than have a small system where the rates are probably maybe the per person, the expenses are higher, but you want to level it across the state.
I'd like to level it across our customers. That's right.
Right.
And one of the situations I think risk-wise for this system is that large industrial customer.
Great, thank you.
Yep.
Thanks
Tom
for,
has a
thanks for
question as
staying
well.
so late tonight as well.
No, certainly. And thanks for coming to the Maine Coast Heritage, I'm sorry, the Coastal Mountain Land Trust event. It was good to meet you there.
Yeah.
Them is fighting words, and I apologize.
No, they're partners too.
They
Tom,
are. They.
Tom has a question too, so before we can wrap this up.
Yeah, thank you. Along the lines of the residential versus the industrial user, can you give us an example of the rates, the variance in rates between industrial and residential?
Yeah, I can get back to you, Tom, on that. I don't have that right in front of me, but I can certainly give you a breakdown of what those are.
Sure. The reason I ask is I am concerned about the impacts of the increase in the fire hydrant fee, and I'm curious if you have a similar increase for industrial users, given that I would assume that they also increase your, have an increase on, you have to increase your capacity to accommodate them. So in that regard, it would seem to me that they would also have to pay, a rate because it impacts the capacity that you have to provide.
No, you're absolutely right on that. And the cost of service, actually, I think, I don't want to misspeak. I want to provide you the original, but my recollection is that the industrial rate goes up higher than the residential and higher than public fire. But I can provide you those actual numbers.
Yeah, that's my curiosity. I want to make sure that from a municipal standpoint, we're not paying more for the fire hydrants and the impact that has on your system than, say, an industrial user does.
And if I recall the details of the cost of service study, I think that'll satisfy I think you'll find that is the case when I provide you the answer.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I think you found, did you say it went from 30 to 24, or it does sound like you found that there was.
We reduced the total impact of fire.
Yeah.
And we did two things on the industrial, but I want to follow up with Tom on exactly what they were. One was that we're going to a significantly fixed rate for the large industrial user with some variable.
Yeah, that made a lot of sense.
And then the other was that there was a general increase to industrial customers. But I'll get you to those details, Tom.
Thank you.
Is this the largest increase that's ever been requested?
No. I don't know right off what it is, but this is not the largest increase.
Any other questions?
I mean, I have so many more questions, but I'm going to reel it in. Thank you so much for.
Thank you very much.
I think it would be good to hear, every year or two, just people don't know how, the whole system works. And one of the things that's interested in the documents, it just goes through and explains like where the water comes from, and you pump from Grassy Pond and, things like that are I think interesting to a lot of people.
We had a lot of people come to the open house, and it was a great event, and a lot of local folks came and walked away after seeing the operation and understanding more what goes into having water flow at the tap every day. I think folks were impressed.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
And with that, we'll move on to update on planning board activities.
All right, thank you. I wanted to do a little update for you on a zoning amendment that has been applied for. And just so you're, I don't think it is helpful if you guys are kind of become aware of these things at the end of the process, like end of the planning board process. So
Oh, it's so fun.
I think it was important to get this to you. So as you probably all know, Borden Cottage is on Bayview, Outer Bayview. They came to the town many years ago now, like 8 years ago now. They were working with McLean Hospital to wanted to do a private residential treatment facility at that location. Lots of, I read through all the stuff that, happened back then during that process. There was quite a highly, I think, controversial issue at the time. It seemed like I was watching it from afar and wondering what is going on in Camden with this private residential treatment facility. It was interesting. Anyway, voters approved it. We created this use called private residential treatment facility. They have been operating there, licensed by the state fire marshal's office. We go do an inspection. The state does an inspection every year. They have 12 beds currently. They're allowed to have 12 beds in single occupancy rooms. That was the zoning amendment that was approved. And they would like to increase to 18 beds in single or double occupancy rooms. That is the only change that they're looking to do. And it's for a number of reasons. They're not here today, but this has already been discussed by the planning board at a workshop back November 21st, I believe. Planning board had absolutely no issues with it. They immediately scheduled a public hearing, and that's scheduled for this Thursday. And then what happens next is I imagine it will come out of the planning board hearing with full support for the planning board, recommending that it go to voters in June. In order to do that, then you guys will have a hearing, and then you will decide whether or not to send it to voters in June. This will all play out likely in February with you. And so that's what this was. This was just to give you an update on where that was in the process. I did a memo that explained it, I think, pretty succinctly and quite well. Again, we've had no complaints ever from anyone, neighbors, concerned citizens about what's happening over there. It's a high-end treatment facility for people with dependency issues. And it costs a lot of money to go there. They're looking to increase to 6 beds to 18 and allow them to be single or double occupancy. And in talking with them, that's for 2 reasons. It can be cheaper if I'm going into treatment and I can be in a double occupancy room as opposed to a single occupancy room. But at the same time, there may be couples that might be in the similar situation and going through treatment where they might have better outcomes if they're together in the process. And that's just in talking with Tom Rodman and Allison Avery, I think is her name, the other executive over there. So planning board had no issues. I just wanted to make sure you guys are aware of it and the process. And that's the only update I wanted to give you today, because it will come out of the planning board on Thursday, ready for a hearing with you folks. And that's where we are. I'd let them know that this was happening tonight. Tom is out of state, so he won't be here. Not Tom Hedstrom, but Tom Rodman. And normally you don't really have discussions about things like this that you're going to have a hearing on eventually, but I don't mind answering some questions if you have any. I think it's a benign issue. I don't think it's a big deal at all. That's me.
Quite the tiptoeing disclaimer intro to I think it's a great thing, and it's very silly how much went into it before.
It was.
They've been really an excellent, I guess we can save it for the hearing, but they've been a really great addition to the community, I think.
Yeah, I agree. That's all. Any questions? I know Tom was at the workshop the last time, and he's mentioned it a couple of times. So I appreciate you, Tom, for really bringing that stuff up and sharing that with the rest of the board so that they know what's happening. I think it's important.
You're welcome. I will say, to add to what Jeremy said, and I've said it before, it was very well received by the planning board. They appear to have their stuff together. They run a well-run operation, it appears, and this is very low impact to what they're asking.
Yeah, they're not proposing any new buildings. I mean, the way I provided you with the existing language and the proposed language, Those things don't change other than 12 to 18 and single or double. That's the only change.
Now, does the fire department have a say, thought, or are they part of the planning process, or does the planning board take care of that?
So we do an inspection every year, as does the state fire marshal's office, because it's a licensed facility. So we're in there often. Tom Rodman is a well-known figure around town. He always comes into the office. He always asks questions about, hey, I want to do this, or I'm thinking of doing this. And that's how we got to this point. I met with him for a while, and he was working with the state fire marshal and DHS on how to license these things and what he wanted to do. So this was the best way to do what he was trying to accomplish. And the state would be happy with this too.
Do they have sewer over there? Isn't there some kind
I
of
asked that question and I forgot the
situation over
answer.
on Baby Street
I
about?
forgot the answer. But it was addressed at the meeting. I just don't remember off the top of my head.
My recollection is the answer was yes.
Right.
I think that's what they said.
I'll have that answer for the planning board on Thursday.
Awesome.
I just don't remember off the top of my head.
A lot of those people over there have only seasonal water too and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, maybe they could build some housing too.
Maybe. That's all I have. So no action is needed at all on that item. Again, I think it's important to include you folks early on these things, so we don't do what happened with, right? In the past, we got to the planning board with you, or the hearing with you folks, and you're like, it's first we know about it. So I don't want that to happen in the future. I like this process of giving you information.
Not this board, Jeremy.
All right.
You must be remembering.
Anything
some
else
other-
on item B?
No, that's it on planning board. The next question, I think, I don't know, wanted to update maybe on short-term rentals. And we are actually meeting with our, and I provided in the packet what Deckard Technologies provided to us as part of the RFP that went out a while ago. They are still getting their systems ready to go. We're meeting with them on Thursday to go over the system and make sure everything is where it needs to be for implementation. The hope is still implementation early January. That's what they promised me. So my gut says it'll probably be mid-January before everything is ready to go. And what I'm working now with Clint, the code officer, is a life safety inspection sheet, or what's going to happen when we do inspections, so that we're going to have that available for people so that they know what the code officer is going to be looking at when they do an inspection. It's primarily all life safety stuff. And I'm not recreating the wheel. Our ordinance, or the code that was adopted by voters, touched on a few things: smoke and carbon monoxide detectors, fuel gas detectors, general property safety, fire suppression systems if needed, things like that. It's pretty, so we're creating that checklist now. It's all going to be standard stuff. Egress windows. The bedroom's in a basement, do they have a window well with a ladder out for that second means of egress? Those kinds of things. Those are all going to be looked at. Septic, we're still working through the septic stuff. As you recall from those discussions, the state subsurface wastewater rules changed, and it requires increasing capacity for short-term rentals, but the state didn't give us what that was. So it's working with site evaluators and the plumbing inspector, who's Clint, to come up with what's appropriate. And I think we're going to be working with people on this one for this year, because it's a big change. I know that there are some people that have already expanded their septic systems in order to accommodate that use. And there are others that just haven't planned on it yet, and getting a site evaluator and contractors doing expansion can be hard to get. So we're going to work with people for the first year, I think, on this, and we'll probably end up limiting the number of guests that are allowed in that short-term rental, so as to we don't overburden the septic system. This is really critical, I think, on the lake, on Maguntacook Lake and the Hosmer Pond, where oftentimes we may not know what even kind of system is there, and even property owners may not know what kind of septic system they have. Thankfully, there is a new law that was passed a number of years ago on properties in the shoreline zone. When they change, you have to assess the septic system. That was never in place before. So that's where we are with short-term rentals. So I do expect the system fully up and operational probably by February 1st. People come in and they ask questions, they call us about it, and we tell them where we are with things. And they're like, oh, that's good. Just want to make sure we know. In the end, what people will do is they're going to log on. They're going to go on to an online portal. That's where they'll register. They'll pay their fees there, and then it'll just get routed to us. We'll do an inspection and all that stuff. So I think it's going to be seamless. Deckard does a lot of this around the country. They have a number of towns in Maine that use them, and everyone I've talked to has no issues with what Deckard's providing to them. Deckard, in their software, their application called Rentalscape, I think right now, I think they've identified, I think I mentioned this the last time we had this discussion, I think 180 some short-term rentals, unique ones in Camden. So it's not far from where we thought we were. They have to do a lot of due diligence to actually determine. And when they say they actually verify map and lot, ownership, address. That's what they verify. So there are ones out there that they see. They're just still doing their due diligence to try to figure out where they are. And Maddie in the office here she's been doing a lot of work on this stuff too, and providing them information when she can. Not that they need it, but she's just doing it. So, any other questions?
Yeah, that portal is available to you guys in the planning office, but not to the general public, I'm assuming.
So Rentalscape is available to us in the office. It's not like wide open for anyone to use. The portal that people will apply to will be on that, will be a separate thing that is separate from Rentalscape. That's the online permitting portal that they have.
So people purchase permits already?
No.
You can't.
You can't do them yet. It's not operational. And we've talked to people and they're like, okay, not a problem. And then we've said to them, this is effective January 1, but we're not going to enforce it. We're not going to go out. No one's really renting short-term rentals right now. There are some. I know, especially over Toboggan weekend.
Oh, that's all the time.
But we're gonna get there. And people have asked, and everyone seems supportive and understanding that it's taking some time. It's a new process and a new thing. So
in the end as well, it's taking you longer to get things set up, and you're also going to be working with people for certain things that take longer to set up on their end.
Yeah, that's true. Yep.
Yeah, septic and reality.
It's a reality.
Okay.
But I think we're in a good place. Anything else?
Any concerns that you have?
On short-term rentals?
Yeah.
No, none at all. I don't, not on this. Well,
plenty of concerns.
There are other concerns about short-term rentals, but nothing on implementing what we have. I do think there are some people in town that are really concerned about the numbers of them in town and its impact on housing. And I just think that's happening. That's out there, and I'm hearing about it from people that they're concerned.
Oh yeah, somebody wrote me the other day and had sort of really dug in deep in his own analysis and was really wanting us to look harder at this because he realized like the percentage of rentals that are not owner occupied was just, this was somebody I think that has an owner occupied one that he rents out. And I think he was thinking that the majority were like him.
Local, right.
And he was like, oh my gosh, I just found this, this information that it's really the majority are not owner occupied. And he was really alarmed by it and felt like we hadn't done enough. And I said, yep, I think that's why we feel like we, need to take a step in that direction. But
and it's just not that they're not owner occupied, but they're actually owned by people that operate short-term rentals elsewhere. It's like that's their business. It's not like, I know we heard a lot during the process that there were people that I'm going to retire to Camden, I'm going to buy property now, and I'm going to be retired in 5 years. I just want short-term rental from now. We heard a lot of that, but you didn't hear a lot of people saying, I'm buying one because I operate a short-term rental business. I have one here. I have one in Florida. I have one in Colorado. I mean, people do that, and that's, it's impacting housing availability for sure. That's all I got.
thanks, Jeremy.
Ken, anything?
I'm good, thank you.
Tom?
Move to adjourn. Right?
Yes. Anyone second that?
Thank you, Jeremy.
Second.
Jeremy looked disappointed for a second, but
No, I was going to say coagulants, surfactant, we're like, these are the opposite things.
Yeah.
But that's
Thank
all.
you for your
I'm good.
patience, Jeremy.
No worries.
Yes, did you hear a second?
No, I did not.
Okay, second.
Awesome. All in favor of adjourn? Thank you.
All right, thanks, everyone.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
See you, Tom.
Night. I feel bad. No one hung out for